So still we can feel daunted or inhibited from actually starting to move our minds towards the Dharma. So the next reflection that is very helpful here is twofold, again. The first is to reflect on impermanence and change, not just at a gross level, but at a subtle level. The fact that nothing ever remains the same for two instants, for one instant, let alone two. Things are always flowing and unfolding, never really getting stuck anywhere. Even if we tried as hard as we possibly could, we couldn't keep anything the same for very long, right? We've all tried. Sooner or later, at a grosser or more subtle level, it will change. And how does it change? How do things constantly change? They change because nothing exists separate and apart from everything else. Everything is embedded in the same global network of interactiveness or interdependence of things flowing back and forth, constantly affecting one another outwardly and inwardly. And so cause and effect, as the shorthand form of describing this network of interdependence, cause and effect, coupled with the ability of the mind to look at patterns, to be aware of what is happening and how it is happening, those two things together mean that we can start to more consciously and intelligently and constructively intervene in what is happening, in what is unfolding, and start to direct this flow of cause and effect in a more productive or positive direction. So how do we change? We change by working with cause and effect rather than feeling like cause and effect is just something that happens to us. So now we know that it's doable, and we know, at least in a general sense, how to do it. How do we get started? But still there can be a sense of, if not outright laziness, at least inertia or complacency, that it's still like a lack of urgency about making it happen. It's just easier to fall back into the same patterns. So the next reflection here is about how things tend not to just naturally improve on their own if we do nothing. That is, if we look at our own tired strategies and techniques for grasping our little cupful of contentment and happiness in life and see how it's fallen short over and over again and all the problems that it has led us to, then we can reflect on the fact that something is fundamentally flawed about the whole approach or the whole strategy by which, without the reflective mind, without the meditative awareness, we have gone about trying to grab a hold of some kind of lasting contentment, comfort, security, or happiness, or kept away anxiety, fears, unwanted change, threats, and suffering. So this reflection, about which I want to say a little bit more, is termed the reflection on the defects or shortcomings of conditioned existence. And what does that mean? It means relying exclusively on that conditioned mind that is always hoping or fearing, seeking or avoiding, relying exclusively on that mind to tell us how to be happy and how to avoid suffering. Because it never works. No one in this world, at least, has ever found lasting, true happiness that way. I won't be the first. You won't be the first. So this is a reevaluation of the entire approach of relying on this kind of conceptual mind and emotions driven by hope and fear, driven by grasping and fixation, as our guides, as our tutors and instructors for how to find depth and meaning in life. The precious opportunity that we have, the fact that we have Buddha nature, the nature of impermanence, cause and effect, the defects and shortcomings of the conditioned mind or conditioned existence. These, as a group, are called the 4 reflections that reorient the mind towards Dharma. So when we say, may my mind move towards the Dharma or turn towards the Dharma, these are the tried and tested reflections that help us ground ourselves and effect that kind of reorientation, to really look deeply at what our priorities are and what we can actually do in a very pragmatic and real way in our lives to start moving in the direction that we really want to go. One of the implications of these kinds of reflections is that, as is tempting to do, if we allow our investigation of spiritual practice to be an attempt to use, let's say, the calming effects of meditation practice, for example, to use that as yet another tool in our arsenal, another weapon in our arsenal for fighting off all that is unpleasant and securing all that is pleasant and desirable. If we allow our spiritual, so-called spiritual practice to become yet another tool of the ego to try to control everything that it experiences with this delusion of lasting security and comfort and peace, then instead of turning our mind towards the Dharma in the sense of genuine transformation, real change, we have allowed what are called the worldly dharmas to invade us, to invade our minds and our beings, and to kind of co-opt or steal away the heart of spiritual practice. What are the worldly dharmas? Well, it means spiritual practice driven by the same type of hope and fear, grasping and fixation that characterizes our usual flow of thoughts and emotions, will result in even treating spiritual practice as a way to, as with the hope for happiness and the fear of suffering, with the hope for good reputation and the fear of notoriety, with the hope for praise and the fear of criticism, with the hope for gain and the fear of loss. Those are called the 8 worldly dharmas. We're not using the next time. May my mind move towards the Dharma. Everything I've said until now is still pretty intellectual. It's a set of reflections. Reflections that, of course, have to occur in the core of our hearts, not just at a kind of superficial conceptual level. But still, there's another side to this principle or this statement of moving towards the Dharma that I want to cover, that is to bring the heart more into the picture. Another sense of may my mind move towards the Dharma is the case, which happens so often, of someone without any preconception or expectation or plan at all in their minds, somehow finding themselves in the presence of some expression or representation of Dharma, whether being dragged along by a friend to meet a meditation teacher or Lama for the first time, or as in the case of someone I know, going to Nepal to study geology before walking into a monastery for the first time. And many people have this unexpected experience of being in the presence of something and feeling moved or changed in a way that is difficult to express, as if the thinking mind just stops, or space opens up, or awareness expands, or something happens that shifts something fundamentally or deeply in their experience so that they want to know more. Why did this happen? What is it about? What does it mean? In the Tibetan tradition, they talk about this as the wonder of the child who walks into the temple for the first time. They don't know what all those statues mean or what the frescoes on the wall represent, but there's a sense of awe or wonder or sense of majesty that something really important is there. Something that appears on the outside but causes something deep inside to respond. Okay? Has anyone here had that kind of experience? A few people. Good. So we can relate this to we can talk about in another context what are called the 4 levels of confidence or faith in the teachings of Dharma. This corresponds to the first of those, which in Tibetan is called Dangwe Depa, which means the faith of feeling struck or moved or a sense of wonder or openness, like you've been deeply impressed by something. And it's very much at a gut level. It doesn't have a lot of intellectual content at this point, but the sense that something is really there. When the mind has gone through this kind of disruption of its usual ways and decided to investigate what is there in this Dharma, what is it that seems so deep and so important? Or when one has gone through these reflections and made some kind of commitment within oneself that there's something of value here to look into more deeply. Well, what is the next step? The second principle, the second Dharma of the 4, is called the Dharma moving along the path, or we could say the Dharma becoming a path. Path as in a way of life. What is most important in life such that one remains interested in it and attentive to it no matter what else is going on. This is really important because when we first start out, our interest in our own spiritual improvement tends to be intermittent. Because the interest comes and goes depending upon what else is happening. And this tends to follow one of 2 sidetracks. One is, when everything is going reasonably well in life, then we feel like there is some time and some ability to do something called spiritual practice, maybe every day or periodically during the year, go on retreat. But as soon as life starts to feel cramped and too much is going on, we feel like all of those other concerns and worries and obligations and stresses and emergencies take priority, and we can't continue to practice until we've dealt with those things. That's kind of a beginner's idea. I'd like to do more practice, but I don't have time now. This is going on at work, or this is going on at home, or my schedule during the day is like this or like that. So there's a sense of the practice and the rest of one's life being at odds with each other or in tension with each other. That's one kind of sidetrack. And the other kind of sidetrack is, as long as things are going relatively well, one again loses that sense of urgency that may have arisen through the reflections that we just talked about. Feel like, well, things are going pretty okay now, and I'm doing my maintenance level half-hour sitting practice every day, and that's calming me down enough to get through my day and deal with my spouse and kids and boss and employees, colleagues. Have I left anyone out?